Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. This show is designed to highlight the work of leaders here in the United States and then beyond. Today with us, Her Majesty Queen Diambi of the Congo. And Queen Diambi joins us live from Dubai. Let's all welcome Queen Diambi. And Queen Diambi, it is a great honor to have you on Successful Philanthropy. And I want to start with a little bit about your beginnings. I understand you were appointed Queen of the Congo a number of years ago, and I think it would be very interesting to our audience to know why you were appointed a Queen.
Greetings, everyone, and greetings, Jean, my dear one. Thank you so much for having me here today. And of course, I will clarify a bit, because when we say Queen of the Congo, people think I'm the Queen of the country of Congo, which is not possible, because the country, it's two countries to start with. And also the Congo in reality is one big region. It's the Central African region. So I'm the Queen of the Bakwa Luntu people of Congo. So I'm the queen of a people that belong to an ancient kingdom, like many of the people in Africa belong to a kingdom before colonization started and before they divided the continent of Africa in the countries we know today. So way before the European came, we had kingdoms, and one of the kingdom is mine, the Bakwa Luntu people of Kasai, who are part of a bigger group that's called the Luba group, and that group is better known than the Luntu, but the Luntus are family, and we are part of the same bigger group, the Luba. And the Luba tribe is one of the biggest tribe in Africa, and especially in Central African region, and also in Southern Africa. And in Southern Africa, they might not be called Luba anymore. They might be called Zulus or the Lunda, but they are part of the same family. So I am queen. I'm a traditional queen of the people of the Order of the Leopard of the Bakwa Luntu people of Kasai. So that's for the first to clarify. And then I'm also traditional queen in Brazil. I was crowned in 2019 in Salvador de Bahia as traditional queen of the African descendants of Brazil, because there are millions of descendants of African descent in Brazil, and they want to reconnect with the continent. So they crown me as well for my work to build bridges between the so-called New World, where many Africans were deported to, and they want to have a link with Africa. So that's why I'm also queen in Brazil as a traditional queen.
Yes, so as a queen of this enormously large number of people, what exactly are your responsibilities?
Okay, today, since many things have changed, because once you are, in 1885 at the Berlin Conference, the European powers decided to divide Africa in bits and pieces as it is today and make those countries now. They also kind of like divided a lot of the kingdoms that used to be there that were already weakened by a couple of centuries of a very, difficult practice in our history that was, the institution of enslaving people. And so those kingdoms already fought for many, many decades and even centuries, and were kind of like depleted and weakened. So many of these kingdoms, were divided further once they divided the continent in bits and pieces, where they made the countries that we know today. However, as the people didn't disappear, the people are still there, and the people carried on with their traditions of keeping, the power, the line of power they received from the ancestors. So as representing my elders and my ancestors, the kings that were there before me, I am basically representing the people. I'm representing our tradition. I'm representing I'm the embodiment of our heritage, of our cultural heritage, and I have power of representation. So a bit like a cultural ambassador. And of course, I can get involved into whichever level and capacity that I wish to be. So I can take initiative on my land. I can sell land if I want to, which I don't. I can also provide, solutions for problems, but I am not a political figure. I'm not involved in the secular politics and political systems of governance.
Yes, and you've been seen with political leaders from all over the world, and then also local leaders in Congo and elsewhere. And how important is this work to you? And talk a little bit about some of the people you've met and what this means for you and then for the people of the Congo.
I think it would be fair to basically explain how first I became a queen, and because there's a backstory to this. So I come from a lineage of people who have been in ruling homes, and they call it royal houses. And in my people, we have six royal houses. That means that every house is related to one of our greatest, our great kings. So it was time for my lineage or my father's lineage to become, king. And when they proposed that to my father in 2006, he was not interested in taking the position because it's a position you can accept or refuse because it's not forced upon you. But the reason why my father refused is because he didn't really see the relevance of endorsing a traditional role, because he was a modern westernized African, like many Africans. After the independence, they went to school in Europe, and they started to have developed their careers in various fields. And my father was an ambassador. He was a diplomat and then became ambassador and then became a director at the Foreign Affairs Office. So he lived in the capital city. He left his home when he was 13 years old. And basically, another thing that was quite sad is that colonization required basically for people, indigenous people, to divorce from their own culture. And basically the label that he was not good, he was not smart, he was something not worth it. So many Africans took the path of basically going towards the West and embracing the Western values and Western cultures and behaviors. So when they proposed to him to become a king, he was like, no, this is traditional stuff. Find somebody else who may be living in the area, in the territory, but I live in the capital city. I possibly not can accept this position. So they say to him, well, the tradition is that when you refuse, the next person in line has to be from your line, although you didn't sit on the throne, but you were the next in line. So the next person, since you refuse, has to come from your royal house. So it has to come from one of either my cousins or my uncles or something. And so he said, well, you can look at my descendants, but I don't think anyone will be the right fit. So I'm the youngest of my parents. They have three daughters. And so my father was like, well, first of all, I only have girls. And then after that, they don't even live in Africa. I have two living in Europe. And then I have one living in America. And they start to ask questions about us. And when my father said, well, one of them is named Diambi. She's the one in America. And I was a therapist and I'm a psychologist, an economist and a psychologist as well. And he said, oh, well, she's in America. But they were curious to say why my name was Diambi. And it was just the name stroke a chord. They say, well, Diambi is the name of the Queen Diambi, my great-grandmother, who was the queen, who was married to the king. And what was interesting with the name is that in Africa, we have a custom that children that are born take the name of their grandparents or their great-grandparents and so forth. But none of the descendants of the king and the queen ever had the name Diambi. So after several generations, I was the only one with that name. So they found that it was interesting. So they'd start to investigate and further understand that I loved Africa. I grew up there. My personality, my experience could be an indicator that I could be a proper candidate to be a queen. But I was living in the US, so they didn't know what to do. So anyway, they eventually made a decision, the Council of Elders decided that they could ask me the question when I would come back home. And I had never gone to the village before. I had never gone to my territory. I grew up in the city, so I didn't know my own territory, my ancestors' territory. But eventually I got there in 2016. And to my big surprise, they just asked me a question. They didn't say, oh, we're going to crown you. None of that. They just asked me one question. They said, we have a question to ask you. Since it's the first time you come back home to your land, we would like to know if you are willing to take responsibility for your people. And I said, yes. And I didn't even think about it twice. It just jumped out of my chest, and I said yes, without ever knowing even what were those responsibilities. So the next second I had a crown on my head, and they were hailing the queen, and I was very confused because that was not something that I expected, and I was kind of like, what am I going to do now? And so they basically told me, I don't have to stay in the territory for now. So in my case, I could continue go and live in America and try to figure what would be my role. So I could just go back once a year or twice a year to do festivals and to sit in state so my people can see me and do whatever I wanted, because I'm not a governor. So anyway, I went back home to Florida, and I was very shocked and very depressed for a minute because I felt I couldn't really help. But then they had told me, just be patient, listen to a voice inside of you, it will tell you what to do. And that voice basically said, invest in you, do what you love. And from the time I was a child, I guess because I was born in a family of diplomats, I always loved going towards others. And so I decided to use my position to amplify the voice of the voiceless. Because, see, my people live far in the jungle. Nobody knows them. They are farmers. They're not sophisticated and fancy people. Most of the decision makers of the world couldn't care less about my people. So I said, you know what? I will become their voice. And I will, to amplify their voice, I have to go meet the world. So I decided to use my resources, my skills, my competencies, my knowledge to go out there in the world and start talking about the alternative way of being a governor of my people, in a sense, an alternative way to manage my population, another way of living, to talk about, our culture, to learn about other people's culture as well. And so from one thing led to another and led to another, and I started to meet amazing world leaders, championing so many different fields, environment and education, how you call it, new technologies. And so starting to find out what were all these elements coming to me so that I could eventually help my people. And that's what I started to do. I started to help my people bring in clean water in my villages, as well as taking care of orphanages in Congo, and now also building a women hospital in the east of the Congo. So all these relationships that I forged over the years allowed me to basically amplify that voice of alternative, and also be there to ask the right questions that sometimes people don't ask because they are so much caught up in one paradigm and don't see further beyond that paradigm. And so that also interests many people to say, wait, we didn't know we still had queen in Africa. We didn't even know that there was still traditional queen in Africa. So everybody is very curious to know more, and realizing that there is an abundance of information about Africa that people don't know, and it's a wealth for the human community around the world. And it's, that voice that I wanted to amplify is basically being amplified, and certainly by meeting people like you as well.
Yes, and Queen Diambi, I read that you are a highly educated woman. You have many degrees, and you've been educated in the United States, maybe elsewhere. And I'm sure that this is an asset to the work you do, which is so incredibly important to represent many factions of people in Africa, particularly the Congo. And I think your work is bringing people together. And I know when I met you, first, I think it was last year, and then this year a few times, I was just so impressed with you and the work you're doing. Now, in the Congo, you are very involved. You mentioned in building orphanages and some other work. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then I want to move on to your philanthropic work outside of the Congo.
I mean, yes, your question really is opening up a way to speak about the fact that building bridge is the most important work that I feel like I have to do, because a lot of the discrepancies and problems we see oftentimes come from the lack of either empathy or lack of understanding, that the situation that are there, very difficult situation, are oftentimes caused by choices, poor choices, and not only of the people there, but sometimes of the international community that do not always see the urgency in making sure that everyone on the planet, not just my people, have an ease at meeting their basic needs. And so building bridges, it's to really make sure that we get people closer together, so that we can have an ability to see that we can act into the world, and wherever we are, we can get interested in whichever situation that we have in front of us. Could it be locally where we live, or internationally? I really am indeed really fervent of making sure that we create those connections, and those connections so that we can know each other better, because the more we know each other or of each other, the more we have an ability to open our hearts and mind and put people together to bring good solutions together. I am also from a mixed background. My mother is European, from Belgium and Luxembourg, my father being an African. So that already placed me in a very favorable position to look at both cultures, and with a bit of a distance, because I'm that one and that one, or I'm neither this one nor that one. I'm a bit like of my own, but to observe and see the things that lack in each, and also see the places of complementarity and see the places of cross-pollination. And so it's easier for me to talk about difficult issues. And sometimes these difficult issues, like let's say I would talk about colonization, because of who I am, I have the authority to speak on both sides of the issue, so that I can help create a safe space for those expressions to happen, and also those corrections to happen, without creating an atmosphere of belligerence and so forth. So that is really for me the first step to a solution, is when we look at each other as being different, yes, but as having a lot of commonalities, and also as being able to work together. That's really, really crucially important. And so the work I do in the Congo, I do work in all over Africa, and not just Africa. I mentioned Brazil before. I am a queen also of the tradition in Brazil, and the work I do is mainly to do with water. I have two major concerns with water. The first being the lack of clean water for many people living in rural areas. And so the problem with that is, okay, the first issue we see, of course, is lack of clean water. That means health issues. So if we don't have clean water, we don't have good health. But the other problem is, like, oftentimes there is water somewhere, but it's pretty far. It's never exactly where people live. So they have to go fetch the water, and it's a whole day end over. And oftentimes women are the one who have to do that, but not just women, girls, little girls, because to go in these holes and to go get the water, you need a petite body, and then girls are the ones learning to help their mothers. The problem is, so when girls are doing that and doing a very vital function for the community, because water is life, however, they don't go to school. And so that's a big problem for me, because so long as girls are not educated, so long as girls are not placed in front of opportunities to grow and to participate in the growth process of a nation, then we have a system that is bound to fail. So for me, putting water solves many different issues. And so that's why my main focus is really putting clean water in every single village, so that people can, the girls can go to school. So that's one of the things. The second thing is I'm avid in love for the environment, and I believe that plastic pollution is causing havoc in the world. So I have a big project that I'm working on with diverse partners, including universities and research institutes and all different collaborators, to clean the Congo River and the water of the Basin of Congo from plastic, and to work with bringing better waste management systems. And so there, because that's also a health concern, but it's also an environmental concern, because the Congo waters are the second biggest freshwater reserve for the planet. So it's not just a Congo problem. If we don't handle it, it will become a global problem, which actually it is already, because we are putting tons of plastic in the ocean, and the waters are becoming deteriorated. The quality of the biodiversity is also being deteriorated, and that's going to have a trickle-down effect all the way into our plates, all the way into the placentas of pregnant women, and further. So we have to really handle those issues that I consider not to be just Congo issues, but I consider to be issues for all of us.
Yes, and I think your priority of clean water for the people of not just the Congo, but Africa, and then the world, and then your interest in ridding the environment of the pollution caused by plastics. These are wonderful and noble and important causes, Queen Diambi, and certainly not only for your people, but for the world. And I love that you're working in these areas. Now, your philanthropy seems to span the globe. I know when you were in the United States recently, I invited you to two events that I was involved with, the New York Women's Foundation Gala and then the French Heritage Society Gala. And you took the time and you came as my guest, and we were so honored to have you, Queen Diambi, and that you took the time to show your concern and interest for universal causes or causes specific to very important to Americans, really meant so much to me. And I don't know how you all do it, but I know you're very involved with CUNY and many other groups here in the United States. But I just want to thank you very much, Queen Diambi, for your support, your interest, and for everything you do. And I want to ask you another question, and that is, why do you do it?
Because I love. I think that's what the ultimate answer is about. When you work from a place of compassion and from a place where you believe you are part of a family. So when I see my sisters like yourself and all these wonderful women doing such amazing things, and especially in the field of philanthropy, that I always say philanthropy is not cut off from return on investment, because people say, oh, philanthropic investment. I say philanthropy has a return on investment, but it might not be immediate and it might not be quantifiable with money value, but there is a return of investment in making society better in the long run for all of us. So people don't look at philanthropy this way, but I look at philanthropy as an investment in the future. So when I see women or any group of people getting together, getting involved to create solutions, of course I want to be there. Of course I want to support, but not just support, but learn as well. And also it's always a fertile terrain to share what I'm doing. I have orphanages, and I have, like I said, I was building a hospital in the east of the Congo for women. I'm also involved now with cities, safe haven cities for women who have been trafficked, with a fabulous woman that is also a bit of a New Yorker, but she's in LA, and so why not be involved? That's more like the answer, because it's only to do good. It's to support, to help, because nobody can do things alone. I certainly cannot, and you cannot. So putting our little piece of rock to build the edifice, this is, if I can do that, for me, it's an honor, because I know that I didn't get where I am by myself. As you can see, I meet a lot of people along the way, and everyone have contributed in some way to making me the queen that I am today, who is an international figure. I'm in Dubai, I'm in South America, I'm in Europe, I'm in Africa, I'm in Asia. I go everywhere. I speak to people. I have people discover Africa, and all these things are important for the future of the planet. So it's gonna be really important that we break the barriers between us. And I think women are excellent at doing so, because we can get together around a cup of tea and a little cake, a pastry, and talk, and then build connections, and we are very active. So I love to encourage women, and I love to have women by my side to encourage me as well.
Yes, and I want to Thank you for your philanthropy and for your leadership, because I think you are a great encouragement, not just to women, but to people all over the world. And your attitude of wanting to connect different groups together to lessen any differences that people may think they have, I think is absolutely wonderful. We have about 1 minute left. And I want to ask you, Queen Diambi, in 30 seconds or less, what advice do you give to young people growing up, say in Africa or here in the United States or just about anywhere, on how to have a successful life?
Well, the first thing is that to have a successful life, you have to accept that you depend on others. You cannot do it alone. And in Africa, the core of our philosophy of life is Ubuntu. Ubuntu means not only humanhood, so you have to cultivate your character as a human being, but it also means I am because you are. That perfect interdependence. It's not codependence, but it's to know that you can only exist because the others are there. So the others are the echo of your existence, and therefore you have to do everything you can to nurture the relationship that you have around you and to amplify, yourself through the work you do to positively impact the life of others.
Well, thank you. And Your Majesty, you've been an absolutely wonderful guest. And thank you for all you do for the people of Africa and this world. This concludes Successful Philanthropy. Our guest today, Her Majesty Queen Diambi of the Congo. I'm Jean Shafiroff, your host. I'll see you next week.